Everyone hates me until they need me. What jobs are the best example of this? I've been a lawyer for a long time, and let me tell you about one of the worst jobs I ever did representing a client. He was a high school teacher. He also had mild habits. He surfaced those websites where people traded passwords to subscription sites. Except one of those sites was a honey trap. Their only business was suing people who illegally hacked their site with stolen passwords that they put on these password trading sites themselves in order to trap people. The lawyers representing the site were the scummiest people I've ever had to deal with. They flat out wouldn't negotiate. Worse yet, my client had been identified through a John Doe IP tracing subpoena. He hadn't been named yet in the lawsuit, but they knew who he was, and if we didn't settle in time, they'd name him in this public filing, which would be professionally problematic for my married, family man, high school teacher client. In the end, we paid the extortion that they demanded, and I felt absolutely bummed. I felt like I had never done a worse job representing my client, any client, ever. And when the settlement agreement with its confidentiality provision was signed and the ransom paid, I got the nicest, longest, most sincere thank you card and note I've ever seen. Which actually isn't much of a competition because basically none of my clients have ever thanked me, ever. But this one guy for whom I did essentially nothing and who was victimized by a dishonest company represented by dishonest and unethical lawyers, this man, my client, who was wronged by our whole judicial system, he was grateful, like profusely grateful. Over my career, I've won hundreds of millions for my clients and I've successfully defended them from billions of dollars in potential liability. But I only have one thank you card on my desk from this guy. It's been on my desk for over a decade now and it won't leave until I retire. The sincere thanks from the one person I helped the least. Postscript, another set of lawyers did a better job than I did defending their client in this case. They did such a good job that the court started asking questions of the plaintiff. And then the plaintiff's attorneys, and they lied because, well, they're liars. And the way that case ended was all of the claims against every remaining defendant were dismissed. The president of the plaintiff went to prison for fraud, and the plaintiff's attorneys went to prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, and the two lead attorneys were disbarred. The day I read that, I called up the defense counsel who had led that charge, and we talked for like 2 hours about the case. And then I went home, opened a bottle of champagne, and celebrated. The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind fine. So hold on, how and why is it legal for lawyers to extort people, but average citizens can't? Story 2. Pharmacists. People get mad at the pharmacy for wait times. Most of the time, it's not even our fault. Prior authorization, refill requests, etc., all between your healthcare provider and insurance. All we can do is wait, just like you. But we get caught in between and get the chewing out. The medicine companies spent hundreds of millions to develop the medicine. They get 25 years from the time they submit to the FDA to research it for a patent protection, meaning even while they're still researching, the clock is ticking and there aren't any shortcuts when they still have to secure FDA approval to market the medicine. After 25 years, only 10 of which they may actually be able to sell for, generics can come out that don't require near the financial investment as coming up with a medicine from scratch, which is why they are cheaper, has nothing to do with quality. As a result, the companies have to charge high prices per dose to recover their investment, which again is easily hundreds of millions. Now here's the kicker. Insurance companies don't want to pay that. Usually, insurance companies try to minimize the number of patients on those medicines through prior authorizations. The doctor has to show the insurance company that they've tried others to no effect, and that the expensive one is likely the most effective option before the insurance will actually pay. However, and I'm just going to tell it like it is, but the Biden administration didn't negotiate prices with the companies for Medicare and Medicaid like they claim. They simply told the companies they aren't paying that much, but the companies can't budge or they risk going bankrupt. What they could do is charge the prices as usual to pay the bank loans, then drop the price for Medicare once the debts are settled and they're making pure profit. But that didn't happen. Medicare just refused to pay it altogether. So here's the end result. The company charged the pharmacy, let's say $1,000 a dose. Medicare says they'll only pay $800, and so now the pharmacy either has to eat a $200 coat and hope to make it up elsewhere, or they have to choose not to carry it. The big chains can afford to eat the cost and keep going. The small business pharmacies can't, so they quit ordering and carrying it. Now, the companies have to scale back production or they will have surplus products expiring on the shelves and losing more money. So they scale back too much and overshoot their projections, and now there is a shortage. Now, because they are also selling less, they have to raise the price even more. Medicare won't budge, and the pharmacies eat even more cost, and more small pharmacies don't carry it. Then patients get fed up with the small pharmacies and having to go to 2 different pharmacies for their prescription, so they move everything over to the big chains to get it all at once. And the cycle continues with all pharmacies hurting from the cost, chains benefiting some from driving more business to them, and small pharmacies being done both ways by the cost and loss of business. And who got the earful from patients most of the time during all of this? The pharmacies, the ones actually taking the loss to help patients while Medicare and the companies feud. On top of this, most pharmacy computer systems look like they are from the early 2000s, and the computers run like it too. Most medicine databases are online now, not printed in a book, so we need the computer to be able to check your medicine, dose appropriateness, and interactions. This contributes to wait times as well and is not our fault at the pharmacy level either. Prescribers often chew the pharmacist as well. Some doctors act like they can't make an error. They take the attitude that they wrote it and it's what the patient needs, so we should just fill it. Two issues with this. First, the pharmacists don't work for you. Second, it's our license on the line just as much as yours if there is an error. We are not just going to take your word for it. This leads me to the part where people should just love the pharmacist. We are checking to make sure the medicine is safe, effective, and appropriate for you specifically. You would not believe how many errors we catch. I've seen doses prescribed off by a factor of 10 or 100 because of the metric system, enough to be dangerous. I've seen them come in listed as 4 times higher than recommended because of the way the prescriber wrote the directions. I've seen medicines prescribed with direct interactions to the patient's current medication list, sometimes because the doctor didn't cancel the other agent, and sometimes because they weren't even aware those two medicines interacted. I have seen medicines prescribed in the exact same class of other medicines the patient is allergic to or have the same chemical group they are allergic to. I've seen medicines prescribed with a coloring dye in it that the patient is allergic to, and the provider either not know about the patient's allergy or not be aware the two medicines have the same dye. And that is not even counting the internal errors made in the pharmacy that we catch. The catch is, most people don't know the pharmacist is doing all of this. A lot of people think the pharmacist is just putting pills in a bottle and slapping a sticker on. That is, until we save you from an errant medicine or dose as a patient, or we save you from losing your license and a lawsuit as a prescriber. In addition, the pharmacist is the expert on a healthcare team. When your health conditions and medications list gets extremely complicated, often it is a clinical pharmacist in the hospital that is actually the one sitting down, figuring out what to prescribe and dosing it, then having an MD sign off and sending it to the actual pharmacy to recheck and fill. We can't diagnose you as well as an MD, but we can come up with a lot more creative solutions to fixing it once we know what is wrong. And often, with a lot less medications and side effects involved, you may not ever see us in the hospital or even know we exist depending on our specialty and how the hospital operates, but we are there and figuring out the best possible treatment for you. The weird thing about it is not too long ago, pharmacists often started in retail, then moved to clinical. Residencies and specialization have hampered this a little bit now, but it wasn't always that way. The clinical side eyeing the retail people doesn't really make sense. Everyone had to do a stint in retail, at least in pharmacy school, and probably worked as a tech or interned at least for a little bit in retail. And given that many pharmacists still working in hospitals started in retail, you would think they would cut retail a break since they have been there. But there is a slight shift I am seeing. Rather than looking down on retail, it's starting to become more of a bitterness. Retail often doesn't require a residency, especially if you have already interned with the company and are willing to start as a part-time floater pharmacist. And retail salaries are starting to beat hospitals again because of supply and demand, both from retirees and school dropouts, and the negative connotation retail has gotten so nobody will work for them. So now, clinical looks at it and says, wait a minute, I worked overtime for 1 to 2 years of residency with slightly better than a minimum wage salary, got the worst of the worst job shoveled on me the entire time, and now the retail guys who didn't do any of that are coming out with sign-on bonuses and a higher salary? What? Well, retail could very well become a desirable position again if they stuck with the high salaries and bonuses. The problem is they are slowly requiring community pharmacy residencies, which I imagine amounts to working as an overtime pharmacist for cheap for a couple of years. Story 3. Actually, artists. Everybody has this weird relationship with art where they still treat it the same as kids' drawings. They feel it necessary to praise your talent for any bare minimum effort sketch, but also assume that it is easy and fun and they could probably do it too. They also can't gauge the difference in time, money, effort between, say, a sketch and a long animation. For hate, people don't automatically hate artists. What they hate is seeing you treating it as work, hearing you talk about the time it'll take, or asking about details you'll need. It breaks their illusion between enjoying entertainment and making it. It's the weirdest thing, but many insist on the delusion that a fun show or a piece had to also be fun to make. And if you're not pulling it from thin air with your gift of inspiration, just guessing everything, you're a fraud. Obviously, other industry people are exceptions, but weird when even your own family, after years, is still like this. Story 4. Cybersecurity. System administrators hate us because we hinder their work even though we just check to make sure they have a reason why a service needs to be on. That's a vulnerability. Software devs hate us because we review their code and don't allow them to push to production with memory leaks. We tell them to fix their code. They get mad if they miss a deadline. Basically, anyone in IT hates cyber until an information breach happens or someone has snuck into the network, then they cry for help. Cybersecurity is not a profitable area. We cost the business hundreds of thousands, people, software, infrastructure, etc. needed to make sure millions of dollars in assets and money don't end up in other people's hands. CEOs don't give enough money to security, so when you see a breach and they give into the hacker's demands, it's most likely because they don't have a good backup system and still haven't gotten the hacker out of the network. Story 5 was a enlisted tactical air controller, ETAC, but known as a JTAC these days in the Air Force, working with, not for, the Army. They never accounted for what the Air Force could do with close air support when putting together computer or field live fire exercises. So we were usually just there taking up valuable oxygen. Sometimes the Army staff would try to get me to do some things I shouldn't or couldn't, regulations or, well, common sense. But I wouldn't do anything I wouldn't do in a real world scenario. For example, the S3 operation officer wanted me to follow his tank on the battlefield in my armored personnel carrier so I could basically serve as a combat taxi for when his tank goes out. Now, I'd go forward if I had aircraft coming, but to hang my relatively unarmed and unarmored out there needlessly, that's a passing wish. The Army pretty much thought we were useless, but the moment actual projectiles start flying the ETAC or JTAC, it's everybody's best friend because he's bringing the stuff from above. Story 6. News producers, at least in my country. The amount of work you put into a news show is really enormous but is never seen. We are paid way less than journalists or news anchors. And whenever we do something great, no one values or mentions that, even though it would be impossible to pull a good show without us and a bunch of others behind the camera. But as soon as you make even the smallest mistake, you are the first one to be blamed, even when it is not your fault, and the first one to be attacked. You cannot do a show without a proper producer, yet you don't value them enough until you need them. And even then, it's short term only. Also, journalists have such huge egos that just battling with that is difficult. Story 7. I'm the guy creating logic and workflows at my job. Nobody ever really sees me until there's an issue. Then I jump into a project, solve the issue, and then detach just as quickly. So after a few weeks, I might get questions about how things are going on Project X, and I have no clue. So I gave them tools and jumped straight out. How they use the tools is up to them. Some managers can get annoyed at me because I'm refusing to do what they say. But it's not so much a refusal of the task as a refusal to take time from my regular stuff to work on something to me that is unclear or too wide of a guess for me. Like one manager wanted a matrix. I said, okay, for what? She responded with, a matrix. And I tried to explain that I need to know what it will contain and how it will be used because a matrix can contain many things at different levels. Some of those specifics I simply do not know. So please, come on, tell me what you want a matrix of and I can fix one up for you. That took 3 days and the manager was probably close to trying and getting me fired. Now they love me again, but I'm out for half a year now on parental leave. Story 8. So this is hyper-focused to a specific military job, but a defense travel system approver and reviewer. People get tagged for deployments and temporary duties sometimes with very little notice, but it almost always has to go through the defense travel system for disbursement of funds and travel arrangements, and there are very few specific rules that must be abided by when setting these up. It's up to the approver and reviewer to make sure the funds are properly allocated and all the rules are being followed. You can't travel on the government's dime until an approver and reviewer have signed off on it in DTS. Problem is, this role is normally filled as an additional duty by random lower enlisted NCOs. So if they are on leave, not at work, etc., then it can be a logistical nightmare getting all that stuff taken care of. I've been simultaneously screamed at and praised at the same time for first not being at work when someone filed for a last-second TDY, but dropping everything I was doing and rushing into work to get it taken care of. Story 9. I have three: EMS, regulatory workers, and the cable guy. EMS, everyone hates having to wait in traffic for an accident or to get out of the way of a first responder who is flying through traffic. I've been screamed at by the parents of the child I was trying to save from their stupidity as they didn't put them in a car seat and then got into an accident. Screamed at for the pain I caused trying to stabilize a leg flopping in the wrong direction by the patient I was helping. My parents and spouses, as we have to help transport someone who was court ordered as a danger to themselves because they're fine, they're doing it for attention. EMS is the person you never want to be glad to see. My wife works for the FCC and gets called every name under the sun every single day as she fields your complaints about X, Y, and X companies. But if you get that phone call saying they were held accountable by God, she was an angel who saved you. As a cable guy, I can tell you we hear it all. I've been threatened with weapons for trying to fix yours and your neighbor's service. But the second your internet starts acting up or your favorite channel starts tiling, you're suddenly happy to be my best pal. Everyone is two-faced about everything. We're all quick to judge when we are mildly inconvenienced. It's the social structure we've all built and the prejudices we all hold. I don't blame people for it. I just wish we could all do a little better every day to be more understanding. Story 10. The job of an IT support specialist perfectly embodies the phrase, everyone hates me until they need me. In the modern workplace, these professionals often go unnoticed or are subject to complaints about strict security protocols and system updates that seem disruptive. However, their true value becomes evident during times of crisis, such as system outages, security breaches, or software glitches, when they become the most sought-after individuals in the organization. IT support specialists possess a unique blend of technical proficiency, problem-solving abilities, communication skills, and patience, allowing them to diagnose and resolve issues efficiently while explaining technical concepts to non-technical users. Despite the emotional toll of dealing with stressed or frustrated users and the lack of daily recognition, their role is critical in maintaining business operations. The moments when they successfully resolve major issues and receive genuine appreciation are immensely rewarding, highlighting their indispensable contribution. Organizations can foster a more appreciative environment by regularly acknowledging the IT team's efforts through public recognition, professional development opportunities, and fostering an inclusive culture. Ultimately, IT support specialists are the unsung heroes who ensure the smooth running of systems and heroically step in when things go wrong, demonstrating their indispensable value even if it's not always immediately recognized. Story 11. Male CNA, female staff hate male CNAs until someone is too heavy to lift. No, from personal experience, I was always treated differently simply because I am a man. Heard the rumors that I'm doing this line of work because it's a good way to see women. I worked in a retirement community. I also heard that I'm a sicko because I'm a CNA. They don't need a reason to make rumors just because I'm a man. I got the most work with the shortest amount of time to get it done, and everyone thinks I had it easy. Imagine you're waiting in a room to transport someone out of a bed where it is required to have a second CNA there for safety. The call light over the patient's room has been ringing for 15 minutes. Why do they not answer it? Because they only want to go assist a friend and stay in the room and chat and pretend they are working. With all this said, whenever there is a patient who is too heavy or an unruly patient who threatens against the staff, who do they always call to help? Me. The best decision I ever made in my life was leaving the medical field. Story 12. Construction. I hear people IRL complain about them when they're here, making noise or, heaven forbid, forcing people to slow down a bit. And I also hear them complaining when work needs to be done, and when they do their job, it's taken for granted. They're not hated online, it's more of an IRL frustration thing. Sorry, you need to go slow in this area, bud. Also, police officers. No one wants to be held accountable for their actions or to be told that they're under arrest or are getting a ticket. Plus, look at all the horrible officers that make the whole profession look bad and barely suffer any consequences. I also get that some areas have entire police forces that truly suck and cannot be relied on. Still though, I bet most of you are dialing 911 or 999 or whatever the combination is so fast the moment you hear a break-in as you cry in the corner. While to an extent I can understand it, I can't stand the ACAB movement because all it does is prevent genuinely well-meaning people who want to protect people from getting into the job, and good people like that being in the system is like the only way anyone can expect a decent change. Police officers need to exist, they just need to be held to the same standard as the people they're protecting, and in order to aid the reform requiring regular psych evaluations. Unfortunately, no system will be forever free from corruption, but that doesn't mean to do away with it all. And if you're connecting with any of the stories in this video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. On to the next stories. Story 13. There are several jobs that exemplify the sentiment, everyone hates me until they need me. These roles often involve enforcing rules, managing difficult situations, or providing critical services that are frequently undervalued until a crisis occurs. Some examples include IT support and tech support. People often get frustrated with IT support when systems are working fine or when minor issues occur. However, when a major technical problem arises that halts work, IT support becomes crucial. Plumbers and electricians. These tradespeople might be undervalued or viewed as costly when everything is functioning properly. During emergencies like a burst pipe or electrical failure, their expertise is crucial. Story 14. Veterinarian. When their pet is passing away and you start to discuss costs and they say, do whatever you can, money was no issue. So you put your heart and soul into saving their much beloved family member. Fast forward and you have saved their pet and is about to go home, so you give them the bill and hear, wow, that's so expensive, that costs more than human medicine. You guys are so money hungry and extorting people that care about their animals. What the bill doesn't show is the hours you spent researching their pet's condition, the nights you spent sitting next to the animal's cage, monitoring its response to treatment, the amount of sleepless nights you had worried that you've missed something and the animal isn't recovering fast enough. Even the next time, the woes will tell you how much it cost last time, not what a good job we did saving the pet's life. I know there's bad vets out there that are only in it for the money, but chances are they got that way after hearing these same lines every day of their career. Yeah, I guess when you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all, huh? Story 15. HR, always seeing posts, HR is not your friend on Twitter or IG with so much hate from comments. I bet mostly from people who got called out for their own fault but never worked in HR, so they don't really know how it goes. I'm not an HR professional, but I work with them closely. It really is a thankless job. People blame them a lot without realizing that they are the same people who fight for them. Their role is to balance the business needs with employee welfare, but they end up as scapegoats for frustrations even if it isn't their fault. They don't know that most of the time, HR is the only reason why they don't have it worse. But not all employees are like that. Offline are some who appreciate our HR folks, especially leaders or managers. Maybe because they know what goes behind closed doors, plus they have the professional maturity to understand it is never as simple as HR is not your friend. Story 16. Top-down, bureaucratically structured production type jobs that heavily rely on experienced, self-driven, intelligent ground staff who are flexible to make up for the limitations of centralized decision-making. Inevitable staff cuts ensue, often from the most experienced, most needed people. Sorry, what was that? You want me to work extra to cover business needs? You want me working additional roles to cover the people you said we didn't need? Oh, I'm really sorry. I forgot to say, here is my notice. I start my new job on those dates. Best of luck to you. Panicked offers of promotion and raises across the board are accepted by a few who have little options due to circumstance. The majority simply want to be appreciated and respected for the role they fulfill, and money can't buy respect. It simply buys narcissists and kissers. Story 17. Flight attendant. As one, everyone loves to say that we are power hungry and yet calls us over to deal with an issue that should be settled between two adults in a social environment. I have a massive binder of rules that I'm required to follow by both my company and the FAA and risk losing my job and my money if I don't follow them. I don't get to make up rules to appease or request. I simply ask the person the thing the other person should have told them, and as long as they aren't causing an interference with my job or a safety or security issue, there isn't much we can do. Also, that we just serve drinks, and yet we are who they call if there is a medical issue that we are trained to deal with, or any other safety security issue. That's the purpose of our jobs. Serving drinks is just extra if we are able to. If there is potential dangerous weather, a medical event, or any other required reason to not serve, then we don't. Story 18. Pharmacists. At the moment in Australia, we are greedy grubs who are just taking the cash in and messing with everyone over. But as soon as your daughter has sold all her Ritalin to all her friends, or your dog ate it, it fell down the sink, whatever, you left it at your holiday house, and if you run out of your own Stilnox, which is on stage supply by your doctor because you can't be trusted with a full packet, All of a sudden, you're my best friend and I can please release him a little early, even though 2 days ago you were screaming at me about why your doctor put you on a stage supply program because somehow it's my fault you can't even control yourself. Meanwhile, of course, your scared little GP doesn't have the confidence to tell you at the surgery that he's instructed us to do a sage supply but written it in code on the script. So we had to tell you and cop all the misuse about it, even though we repeat ourselves 13 times. The doctor has ordered it. Take it up with him. By this stage, of course, it's 5 minutes to close because you got the script at 10 a.m., but come in 10 hours and 55 minutes later. So by this stage, your GP is at home enjoying a $100 bottle of wine in his mansion in Brighton after driving his BMW home and then sitting to blubber over the notebook while I'm frantically trying to sort out the 4 other customers that have turned up, filling their scripts, trying to put an order through and shut down the shop while you're still screaming about only getting 7 tablets of Stilnox, when I know full well you're going to be in the shop in 2 to 3 days asking for more because you downed a week's worth in 2 days like you always do. Story 19. Police officer. I garner a lot of hate in the streets, especially from the females in the projects. Luckily, I know they'll appreciate me when I make their boyfriend and baby daddies leave their apartment each night after they keep inviting them over. Likewise, when they start fights with their men, I'm lucky enough to break up the fight. Sadly, they go from being happy to have me there to being angry at me when I cuff and jail them for being the primary aggressor against the male. Even if you get the brakes off of you, if you made first physical contact, I'm taking you to the hospital, then to jail. Women don't seem to grasp that just because someone is yelling in your face, you have no right to strike or push them. I think there's a stereotype that police always arrest the males. If that were true, it would be really poor policing, in my opinion. Story 20. An attorney lives in my condo building who handled the defense of a person who is pretty obviously guilty of some very terrible crimes. I had the opportunity to talk to him about it over drinks one night, paraphrased his justification for the very good defense he gave his client. Everyone deserves a fair trial and fair representation. I could justify it by saying, I did the terrible job that needed to be done, but that implies I didn't do the best job I could, and I absolutely did. You're asking me how and why. And here's the thing, he's going to try for an appeal. If I don't do my job well, that appeal is going to be granted. That appeal will be many years down the road, and memories will be fuzzier, evidence will be lost, witnesses may be unable to be located or just straight up gone. And suddenly, what was a slam dunk is a fuzzy case with a lot of gray, and the guy gets off. I'm going to make the prosecution work for their conviction. I want it to be hard because that way everything will be done right and there won't be a case for appeal. That awful person will now be in jail for a very long time, and if he isn't convicted, maybe this slam dunk case where everyone knows who did it wasn't slow slam dunk after all. Story 21. Our clients as public defenders are the meanest to us. Just this last Friday, I had one screaming at me because I'm always telling her that she is accused of something. Well, yes, I need to explain that she has been accused of another crime and why she has been accused, the evidence. So then she is yelling at me about how she refuses to participate in any of the options. By the way, I firmly believe that I would have won our last trial if she had been willing to talk with me before the trial. For weeks preceding the trial, I called and left messages about how we needed to prepare because I could win this case if she would review the case with me. She knew the name of a witness but wouldn't tell me the name. I also had a way to win without that witness if we could have prepared her testimony in advance. Not to lie, but to simply answer my questions rather than go off yelling during the testimony. Also on Friday, I had another insult because I went to visit him in the jail to explain that the phone calls he had made to his victim from jail were going to be used against him in court. Apparently, I made him call her when I told him not to do so, and that every call he makes from the jail is recorded, and that they really do listen to the recordings. I'm not fighting for him because I'm telling him all this. We often also get threats from some clients. I've had them threaten to harm my children, and I've had one figure out where I live and show up there. And my office has been vandalized as well multiple times. By the way, I have a much higher than average win ratio. But I can't often overcome you committing a crime on video, confessing to the cops, and having the evidence in your possession long after the event. Of course, the main issue is that we are the only ones willing to talk with them, so they unload on us and they lack basic self-control when substance is a food group unto itself. People always say that their PD isn't doing anything for them, but I think that's a lie. They want you to make the charges go away, and that's not a thing, buddy. I practiced law for a handful of miserable years, and my shyster boss took any case that would walk in the door and had money. We only did a handful of misdemeanors, but I will never forget the guy who expected me to get the charges against his wife dismissed. She was on probation for retail fraud. She shoplifted, again, but somehow my job was to make it go away. I actually got the prosecutor to agree to just extend her probation by a few months if she pled guilty. A win, in my opinion. Nope. He called me a stupid white person as we left the courtroom and grieved my boss and me. Fun times. Story 22. I work in security, so me. We're the ones who have to tell people no and make their task more difficult and time consuming because of policies and whatnot. Like, I'm sorry, man, but I can't just let you in because you tell me what company you're with if you're not on the list. It means someone didn't submit the request properly, so that's not on me. If I start letting people in, I will lose my job. There were always a few entitled staff members who would literally demand that we put access on their pass for certain areas that required high clearances. They didn't want to go through the process of completing a request form for approval so that they could get verified. We would have to get someone else to sign them in as an escorted visitor. Of course, when they need something from us, they act all nice. I just hated when those staff members were all like, why is my pass not working? I should have access to this area. I don't get it. As a security guard, I find tradies to be the most understanding of us. If their access passes are not working, they know it's not our fault and that there's red tape coming from the admin above us. I'd always make sure to thank tradies and contractors for their work after they sign out. When I was a commercial pest guy, I would always verify myself as much as possible at the security desk. It makes it easier for them, and I wouldn't make security guards call my site contacts. If I got denied, I would just accept and not make a fuss. Story 23. IT, when everything is working, why do we even have IT? When something is broken, why do we even have IT? Then, when you get things working great, they outsource IT support. The fact that outsourcing IT is, in my experience, one of the worst things to do. You get a support team that will have little overlap in working hours with the main team, so most issues will now be delayed for a full day. Working culture may be too different, so that adds friction. Support team needs to close tickets, so you get extra bureaucracy, and I have experienced a ticket being closed without the issue fixed. And finally, in most cases, you get what you pay for, so offshore support is cheaper, but also less efficient. Ended up in an argument with one of my old directors about this. I put a load of procedures and things in place to make my job easier and the users, so he goes, well, why do we need you anymore then? I responded with, because I'm the one who thought to do this stuff and no one else did. This is where a good ticketing system can really shine. If you can show concrete evidence that users have less downtime now than before you made changes, you can say, this is the value I provide. Especially if you can show how many man hours, my autocorrect suggested man, lol, you've saved users, that can be directly converted to dollars. One job I worked at, a friend said he overheard my boss saying he was thinking about letting me go because I wasn't getting enough hours of work done. I was able to print a report that showed I was getting more done and generating more revenue than my coworkers. I just didn't need to use as many hours as them, didn't end up getting fired. Story 24. I work in an automotive configurator business. We have several clients who ask us to create digital twins, digital versions of their cars or washing machines or other products. And when we say sure and we give them our price, they often try to do it themselves. Like we have one client now who wants everything done by September. Included in that list is pictures of a new car they asked us to do a digital twin of in February, but then wanted to do it themselves. Now, when we will do pictures, there is no digital twin or really any form of baseline for us to work from, and creating those twins takes time. So we are doomed because they didn't think they needed us, and now they kind of want us to do both jobs at like no time at all. Also, Sweden has vacations throughout the entire July, so it's basically only August to September that we will be able to do any work at all. Story 25. Housekeeping. People were such schmucks to the housekeepers at the hotel I worked at. To them, they were a bunch of foreigner scum, personal servants, and thieves. In reality, those girls were the hardest workers I've met, and for little pay in return. They had a lot of integrity. They could find a diamond ring, and every single time when they could pocket it, they turned it into me so I can call its owner. If you accuse a housekeeper of stealing with no proof otherwise, you're a schmuck. Years in the hotel industry, and I've only ever seen one person steal, a manager. One time I had to stay in hotels off and on for a few months due to some issues with selling my flat and working in a different city. I had a hard time getting a monthly rental, so I stayed in a chain hotel during the week and went back to my flat on weekends. I didn't have a lot of money because of this, so I wasn't able to always leave tips, which I felt bad about. But I did make sure all my rubbish was bagged up at the end of my stay, that the reception knew I didn't need to touch up things during my stay, that I would go down and ask for towels if I needed them, etc. I figured the least I could do was ensure housekeeping didn't have as much work in my room and they didn't have to pick up after me. And at the end, when everything was finalized and I was no longer needing the back and forth, I gave the lassie at reception, who knew me at this point, a card and some flowers and a few boxes of chocolates to split amongst the staff. Some of the staff I witnessed from other guests were appalling. The way people feel like they can talk to staff, whether that be housekeeping or reception, is really disgusting. Story 26. I left public sector public health for hospital infection prevention shortly after the first surge, and I do my best to get to know people throughout the hospital, but especially EVS. I rounded up a vendor who was gathering data for a project he presented weeks later to our C-suite folks. I wasn't invited, but apparently he made a big deal about how the hospital's infection prevention team demonstrated strong working relationships with any staff member we encountered, from specialists to EVS. And we knew the names of people that are literally doing the labor that prevents infection. I don't know, seems kind of bare minimum from where I sit. I get the title and six figures annually while they do the actual work. IP as a whole deserves a fair bit of the hate we get from other hospital employees, and with few exceptions, no one really needs us. Story 27. I was an HR admin for a growing company. I was frustrated beyond belief with my boss. We had a few store openings coming up that were acquisitions of other companies, so basically I had to process all the new employee paperwork for several hundred new employees. These were flagship stores communicated to investors as the future. Well, I quit at a point in this process, literally told the boss off and walked out. According to my friend slash coworker who remained, they were unable to get the stores open on time because of this. It crashed investor confidence, and the stock price, which had been climbing rapidly, stalled and later crashed. Not taking credit for the crash, but I do believe I was the straw that broke the camel's back. Nowadays, I work in risk management, so looking back, it is astounding how a publicly traded company with 1,000 plus employees had an HR department of 3, a director, a benefits admin, and then I was a generalist admin. It was a massive hole in their strategy. People hate HR, and often for good reason, but some companies ignore the reality that it holds things together, all because it is not a revenue-producing department. Story 28. Teachers. Apparently, currently, teachers are letting kids use litter boxes, but then I remember once the 2020 hit, everyone was calling teachers essential because people were forced to deal with their own evil spawn they spewed out onto the world. We love and appreciate kids, it doesn't go unnoticed, but unfortunately, we have more immediate to deal with, so I apologize on behalf of all your teachers who might not have taken the time to let you know you are appreciated. The number one way to have a good life, have friends, and not get in trouble, hell, even get away with things that you probably shouldn't be doing is this. Don't be a schmuck. It's that simple. Just don't be a schmuck. If your teacher catches you on your phone and asks you to put it away, don't argue. That would just be being a schmuck. Just say sorry and put it away. Your teacher doesn't think it's that big of a deal anyway, unless they are reminding you all of the time or you lie about it and try to start an argument. Did you walk in a minute late without a pass? Don't announce it to the teacher or class. Don't stop and say hi to your friends while the teacher is giving instructions. That would be being a schmuck. Just silently make your way to your desk, get out your notebook or whatever, and try to catch up. Your teacher will probably let it slide. Why? Because you aren't being a schmuck. If you have a crush on someone and you finally work up the nerve to let them know, but they don't feel the same, don't insult them. Don't talk bad behind their back to your friends. That is being a royal schmuck. Just say, okay, but I still think you are a cool person, and if you ever want to hang out just as friends, just let me know. And you know what? Other kids tend to be schmucks, and they might talk bad about you behind your back to their friends, or they might not. But as that person matures and grows older, they will realize something. You are not a schmuck, and you will probably become friendly, if not friends. Why? Because you are not a schmuck. And then when schools reopen, finally, teachers have to actually do their jobs now, as if they weren't working during lockdown already, right? All right, if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.